Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to have you here as you start your journey to the New York Specialized High School Admissions Test, SHSAT. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about a math lesson which will actually help you build a foundation so that you can get a top score. So before you begin, make sure that you do have a pen and a notebook ready because I am going to talk a lot about all of these different concepts of today's lesson. Make sure that you do write down all of the strategies. There are a couple of practice sums as well. So you do need to get properly ready before we start this lesson. And at the same time, before we start, if you cannot afford private tuitions and at the same time very expensive lessons, don't worry about that because we have an app called SHSAT Prep. You can actually download it from the Apple App Store. Our free lessons and app practice are actually designed to help you improve your skills without the extreme level of expenses that we do get for, one-on-one tutoring and any other sort of those services. Plus, in our app, you can also get predictive tests, which is actually going to give you a feel of what that exam feels like, what a real life exam feels like. So now let's get started and take the first step into getting into one of NYC's specialized high schools. So let's get started. So in the very first question, as we can see, we need to multiply two numbers and both of these are integers, right? So let's see. If we need to multiply 8365 to 658, what we do here is we do the first digit first, right? We are going to multiply all four of these digits with 8 first. So that becomes 5 times 8 is 40, carry the 4. 8 times 6 is 48 plus 4, 49, 50, 51, 52, carry the 5. 8 times 3 is 24 plus 5, 29, carry the 2. 8 times 8, 64 plus 2 is 66. Put a cross sign. Now we're going to multiply all of these with the number 5. So 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2. 6 times 5 is 30, with 2 it's 32, carry the 3. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18, carry the 1. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 1 is 41. Put two crosses this time. Now we're going to multiply everything with 6. 5 times 6 is 30, 0, carry the 3. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 3 is 39, carry the 3. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 3, 19, 20, 21, carry the 2. 6 times 8 is 48, plus 2 is 50. Now we're going to add all of these digits. So that gives us 0, 5 and 2 is 7, 9 and 2, 11, carry the 1, 9 and 1 and 10, 10 and 8 is 18, and 6, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Carry the 2. 6 and 2 is 8 plus 1, 9 plus 1, 10. 0, carry the 1. 4 and 1 is 5. And finally, 5. So that gives us what? That gives us 50. That gives us 504, 170. Okay? Hope you got this one right. If you did, let's move on to the next example. Find the product of 6358 and 497. It's a similar type of question, but if you're not aware of what the word product means, in basic English terms, product means goods or services or things that we see, right? But in mathematics, product is once again multiplication. So this means that just like the one that we did before, we are supposed to multiply 6358 with 497. Let's go. First of all, we need to multiply the first digit, which is 7, with the entire thing, right? So that gives us 8 times 7 is 56. Write 6 here, carry the 5. 7 times 5 is 35. With the 5 is going to be 40. Carry the 4. Then 7 times 3 is 21 plus 4. 22, 23, 24, 25. Carry the 2. 7 times 6 is 42 plus 2 is 44. Give a cross here. 9 times 8 is 72. Put a 7 as a carry. 9 times 5 is 45 plus 7. 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. Carry the 5. 9 times 3 is 27 plus 5. 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Carry the 3. 9 times 6 is 54 plus 3. 55, 56, 57. We're going to put two crosses this time, multiply everything to 4. So 8 times 4 is 32, carry the 3. 4 times 5 is 20 plus 3 is 23. Carry the 2. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14. Carry the 1. 4 6 is 24 plus 1 is 25. Now let's add them all up. It's going to be 6 over here. 2 and 0 is 2. 5 and 2 is 7. 7 and 2 is 9. 4 and 2 is 6. 6 and 3 is 9. 4 and 4 is 8. 8 and 7 is 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Carry the 1. 5 and 5 is 10 plus 1 is 11. Carry the 1. 2 and 1 is 3. So that gives us 3, 1, 5, 9, 9, 2, 6. All right. So we're done with another one, as you can see. Let's move on to this one. So basically, in this entire lesson, we're also going to have a couple of practice materials for you. As you can see, we are supposed to multiply this with this. Please do it at home on your own notebook and then match the answer to the one that's already given, all right? Let's move on. Now, here's another example. So what if we find like a word problem equation? What happens in that case? No need to worry. Most definitely, let's just look at the question first. A container holds 48 bottles of water. If there are 346 containers in a shipment, how many bottles of water are there in the entire shipment? What that means is, in one particular container, there are 346. However, each container has 48. Let me just break it down for you. Let's say if we have 3 containers and either of these containers have 2 bottles each, how many bottles are there? 3 times 2, 6, right? So same here, we have just 2 big numbers that we need to multiply. So the essential thing here is for you to understand what the question really asks you to do, right? So 346 times 48, let's just go for it. 8 times 6 is 48, carry the 4. 8 times 4 is 32. With the 4, it's going to be 36, carry the 3. 8 times 3 is 24 plus 5. Sorry, 8 times 3 is 24 plus 3 is 27. Put a cross here. Now, once again, we can put 6 times 4 as 24, carry the 2. 4 times 4 is 16 plus 2 is 8. 18, carry the 1. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13, right? Now, let's just add these all up. It's going to be 8 here. 6 and 4 is 10 here. Carry the 1. 8 and 8 is 16. Carry the 1. 3 and 3 is 6. And there's just going to be a 1 here. So that's 16608. All right? So we did understand already how to figure out word problems like this. Let's move on to another practice. As you can see, try to do this on your own. Once again, match if your answer comes out like this, all right? Let's move on. So now that we're done multiplying basic integers, here's one where we need to multiply 2 decimals, as we can see here. So the first thing that you do need to identify is, for multiplication of any sort of decimal, we need to, first of all, imagine like the decimal is not even there. So 23.5 with the decimal removed is now 235, right? 0.748 with the decimal removed is now 748, because any number that has a 0 in front is basically the same number. It's like 02 or even 007, 007, right? 007 is just 7 itself. So, okay. So first of all, what we do is we are going to multiply it just in the same way that we have been learning so far. So the first step here is we are going to multiply everything with 8. So 8 times 5 is 40, carry the 4. 8 times 3 is 24 plus 4 is 28, carry the 2. 8 times 2 is 16 plus 2 is 18. Now, let me show you another way. Sometimes you can also find different sorts of solutions, right? Just like I showed you that you can put a cross here, you can also put a 0 here, because essentially 0 has no value. So instead of putting a cross, in some lessons or in some books, mathematics books, you might also see that in the case of a cross, there's a 0. So I'm going to show you ways to do both, all right? So we can put a 0 here. Now let's multiply everything with 4. 5 times 4 is 20, carry the 2. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14, carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. This time, we're supposed to put 2 crosses, right? In that case, we are supposed to put 2 zeros. All right. 235 times 7 is what? 5 times 7 is 35. Carry the 3. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 3 is 24. Carry the 2. 7 2s are 14 plus 2 is 16. Now let's just add everything up like we have already learned. So that gives us 0. This gives me an 8. This gives me 5 and 4 is 9. 9 and 8 is 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Carry the 1. 9 and 1 is 10. 10 and 1 is 11. 11 and 4 is 15. Carry the 1. 6 and 1 is 7. And it just gives me a 1. So that gives me 17578. All right. Also, what you need to know is because it's 175,780, that's actually not the end of our answer, by the way. So if we do want to figure out the final answer, what we need to see here is right next to the first number, there's how many digits? Right next to the first decimal, there's 1 digit next to the decimal. And here we have 3 digits next to this decimal, right? So in total, how many numbers do we have next to the decimal? 4, right? So what we do now here is we are supposed to assume that there is an invisible decimal right here. Let me just change my color so that it's easier for you to understand. So let me just think that there's an invisible decimal right here. And because we have 4 numbers right next to the first decimal, right next to both of these decimals, what we're going to do is we're going to go 4 units up front, okay? Quite easy. So that gives me 17.578. Now, in this case of this 0, you can write it or you can even skip it because essentially what we know is 2.0 and 2, they're both the same thing. So this 0 really does not have any value. So this is my final answer. Got it? Let's see another question. Okay, we have another one here. And like I previously told you, the first thing that we need to do is we need to ignore the decimals. So it's just 86 over here and 35 over here. So let's start. 86 times 35. So 6 times 5 is 30. 0 carry the 3. 5 times 8 is 40. 40 with 3 is 43. In the case of a cross, let me just put a 0 now. Now, 6 times 3 is 18, carry the 1. 3 8s are 24, plus 1 is 25. Let's add them. So that gives me a 0. This gives me an 8, 9, 10, 11, less than 1, carry the 1. 5 and 5 is 10, carry the 1. 2 and 1 is 3. 3, 0, 1, 0. All right. Now, how many numbers do we have next to this decimal? 2. How many here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 here. So what do we do in this case? We assume that there's an invisible decimal right here. We are going to go 2 and 5, 7 units to the left. All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what? Let's just go 1, 2, 3, 3 more. So what happens here? What happens here is we are going to fill in the blank with zeros. See? So what's my final answer now? My final answer to this is 0.000 and then what? 301. And do you remember if we have a 0 at the end of any decimal, even if there are like 100 zeros here, it doesn't really matter. So we can skip this last 0 over here. That's my final answer. Got it? Let's now move on to the next question. We have a practice sum here. Like I said before, do this on your own and match the answer. Okay. We have another word problem here. This time we have this in decimals, right? A farmer harvested 31 bags of apples. If he sold apples for $3.54 per bag, how much money did he buy selling all the apples? So in total, it was 31 bags, and each bag was for $3.54. Let me give you an example. Let's say I sold 10 bags, each for $5. How much did I earn? So each for $5, and there were 10 bags, so it's 5 times 10 is 50, right? Same here. We're supposed to multiply this, but in the case of 3.54, we are going to assume that it's 354. Now, the thing is, are you going to write in this form? No, okay? Whenever we have 3 digits here, 2 digits here, as in the number that has the most amount of digits should go up. So this means that it should be 354 times 31, which gives me what? Let's do this real quick. Everything times 1 is just 354 itself. That's quite easy. Let me put a 0 over here. 4 times 3 is 12. 2, carry the 1, 5 times 3 is 15 plus 1, 16, 6, carry the 1, 3 times 3 is 9, 9 plus 1 is 10. Now, if we add them all up, 4 and 0 is 4, 5 and 2 is 7, 6 and 3 is 9, it's 0 here, it's a 1 here. How many decimals? No decimal right here, but we have 2 decimals here, which means we are going to go 2 units to the left, right? So that gives me the final answer of 109.74. That's the amount of money that he did get. So let me just put a dollar sign. Cha-ching, okay? So with that being said, this example, I hope you did understand. If you did, here's another practice material for you. Make sure that you do get this answer correct. All right, let's now move on to division. First of all, let's look at dividing integers, all right? If we want to divide integer, what's the strategy that we should do? First of all, the number that you see on the right is basically the number that goes here to the left when we do the long division. The number that we see on the left is basically the number that goes inside. So that's 56550. So the first thing that you do need to do is you need to predict. You need to predict that because it's 87 and most definitely we don't know the times table of 87, that's impossible. So we need to predict what can actually go so that we can, figure out the first 3 digits. So let's not think about these 3. Let's only think about 565. If we only consider 8, we know 8 times 7 is 56. But it's 87. It's not 80. If it were 80, then we could have said that since 8 times 7 is 56, so 80 times 7 is 560, and then bring it forward, right? So see, I hope you're understanding my strategy because at the end of the day, we cannot use our calculator, right? So, but because it's 87, we know that the value is going to be slightly a little bit higher than that. So instead of doing 87 times 7, we can do 8 or we can do 6. We can bring 1 digit lower. You know why? Because whenever we have a bigger digit, if we want to know the next term, it's going to be a digit smaller than that. So had it been in the case of 87, let's say in the case of 80, had it been 78, had it been 77, 73, maybe we would have tried for bigger numbers. Got it? But because this is big, we're going to take 1 digit smaller than that. So 87 times 6, let me do this real quick. It's going to be 7, 6 is 48. 7, 6 is 42. Carry the 4. 8 times 6 is 48 plus 4, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. So that gives me 522, right? So 87 times 6 is 522 precisely, all right? Now, if you subtract these two, it's going to give me 43. Now, what we do is we bring this 5 down here. So that gives me 435. Now, in my head, I'm going to be thinking about 87 and 435. I'm going to think that, okay, since it's 435, it's 87. If we thought about 80, 8 times 5 is, 8 times 5 can be 40. So we can go in that route. So let me just quickly do 87 times 5 over here. So 5 times 7 is 35, carry the 3. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 3 is 43. Wow, fantastic. So this means that if we put a 5 here, it's just going to be 435. If we subtract, it's going to be ending up with a 0. So we put this 0 down, which means that 87 times 0 is 0. So my answer comes out as what? My final answer is, as we can see, it's 650. While I'm doing this math, it's also very important to know how I'm thinking, okay? Because at the end of the day, you need to do these on your own and you need to really figure out what number goes with what so that you don't end up doing all the way from 1 to 10, okay? Yeah, we have another number here. This time, it's a bigger number, yeah? So for bigger numbers, we are going to employ the same strategy. We are going to write 358 over here and 717109 over here. Now, first of all, if we just consider 3 and 7, we can write 3 times 2 is 6, right? That's how we can do it. So let me think what 358 times 2 is. Okay, let's see if it matches. So 8 times 2 is 16, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, 10 plus 1 is 11, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. See, it's quite the same. So we can actually put this 2 down and write 716, which gives me a 1, just a 1. Now we bring 1 digit down, that's 11. Of course, 358, and here we have 11. Even if you write 1 here, it's going to be 358, which means that we are going to end up with a negative number, which we don't do, which means that we should put a 0 over here. That gives me 1, 1, and now we put the 0 down. Once again, we cannot put 1 because 110 is less than 358. We again put a 0. That gives me 1, 1, 0. Now we put the 9 down. Now we're going to see, because it's 11109, and let's consider just 3. Let's say this is 3 and this is 11. What would we have done in that case? We would have done 3 times 3, right? So let's see what 358 times 3 is. So that gives me 8 times 3 is 24. Carry the 2. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 2, 17. Carry the 1. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 plus 1 is 10. Very close, right? So we can actually put the 3 down. That gives me 1074. Now if we subtract, it gives me 35. Now what? Now, because we have remainder, we don't need to worry about that because there's a format in which you can actually write down whatever we are actually doing. The format is the number that you see right here, we call it quotient, Q. The number that you see right here is remainder, R. And this number here is divisor, D. So the format is we write the quotient here, we write remainder, and then we write the divisor. That is what we call when we do a mixed number, okay? So it's going to be 2003 over here, 35 over here, and 358. That is our final answer. At the same time, if it just tells you to do the long division, you know what to do, okay? Let's move on. Let's see what else we have in today's class. We have a practice material for you, of course. We need to see if our quotient and our remainders match, okay? Now, we have, as we already have predicted maybe, we have a word problem now. Barry produces fruit juice in cans. Each carton can hold 18 cans. If Barry has 440 cans and fills each carton to capacity, except for the last carton, how many more cans will he need for the last carton? So basically, this means that in addition, Barry has some left, okay? So we need to know how many more he'll need, which means that because there's some that are actually, leaving us, which means that we need to find what we do when we divide this with this, and then we can figure out what we can do with the remaining ones. So if we need to know the remaining parts, we need to know the remainder. For remainder, we need to go for what? Division. So let's just divide this with this. 18 and 440. If we do 18 times 2, that's 36. By the way, another useful trick that you can do, you can actually memorize times table all the way from 1 to 20. I think that's going to be fantastic for you, so that because you guys are not supposed to use a calculator, yeah? So 18 times 2 is 36. Subtracting this gives me 8. Bring the 0 down, and we can now do 18 times 4, which is 72. That gives me 8 as my remainder. So see, my remainder here is what? It's 8. However, how many cans can it hold? It can hold 18 cans, but it gives me a remainder of 8. So how many cans can the last carton hold? The last carton is holding 10 cans, okay? So it's 10 cans that the last carton is holding. It's not to its full capacity, but still we do need an entire carton to hold the 10 cans, right? We cannot break the carton up. Did we understand? Okay, so if we did, let's move on to the next question. When the number x is divided by 79, the quotient is 42, the remainder is 35. What is the number x? This is quite like to the point because we don't have any cartons or cans to think about. It's totally like a math type question. And to do that, what we do is whenever you see an equation like this, there's a format, okay? When the number x is divided by 79, so x being divided should be on one side, equals is divided by what? 79, right? 79 here is the divisor. So what we write here is we write the divisor here, okay? Then we do times to the quotient, and then we add the remainder to it. So it's a format, okay? So by the way, do you know what x is called? A lot of us don't know, maybe we do know. So just if you do want to know, it's called the dividend, all right? The number that gets divided is always called the dividend. So it's 5/2. In that case, 5 is the dividend, okay? So now let's see. This is the format, so let's just write everything as it is. So it's going to be what? It's going to be 79 times 402 plus 35. I think this is quite simple because we have already been doing a lot of these. So we can just write 31758. I'm just writing the answer down. You can match doing it on your own. And then finally, if you add them all up, it's going to be 31793. Okay? So this was one way of doing it, okay? We're almost at the end of our lesson, so let's see. Yeah, we have a practice question here. Do this on your own. Check if you've got the answer correct. Yeah, so we are supposed to divide this with this. So what are we going to do if we have a division that has a decimal point? Let's see what we do here. So in this case, we have two decimals that are getting divided with one another. The first thing that we do need to know is how to remove the decimals, okay? If we write it in this format, 55141 and then 6.7, we have three numbers that go next to the decimal. We have one number that goes next to the decimal. So if we multiply this, it's going to be times what? We need to multiply 3 zeros so that it goes to the right, okay? Now, 3 zeros are not just going to be there for no reason. So we need to put a 1 over here. Let me just bring it easier for you. Let's say if you have 0.5, and if you want to remove the decimal, all you do is you multiply it with 10 because it's one digit. Got it? However, because this has three numbers, this has one number, if I did 10 with this, I'd also have to do 10 with that, and doing 10 with that is just going to give me 551.41, which does not really fulfill our point, right? Which is why I did 1,000 over here, and if I want to do 1,000 over here, I need to do 1,000 over here as well. So that gives me what? That gives me, that actually removes the first decimal, the digit from the first decimal very neatly. However, here what happens is, because we are moving this to 3 units to the right, see, 1, 2, and 3. We have 2 invisible zeros right here. So the number that we get now is 6700. Okay? I hope you did understand up till this point. So now what you can do is you can divide according to whatever we have already learned so far. Just divide this using the basic format that we have learned for integers. This was one of the ways, okay? So this is like one of the ways that you can do, or I am going to show you a complete different way so that you can decide for yourself which method that you do want to do on your own, okay? So let me just clear this board and start again. There's another format that you can do, and that is we have 6.7 and we have 55.141. Let me just do a times 10 over here and a times 10 over here. Why, you may ask? Because of course we know that if we just multiply that to a times 10, 6.7 is now 67. But what happens to this? This, as I've previously explained, it's just going to have 1 unit. The decimal is just going to move 1 unit to the right. So that gives me 551.41, right? That is, as we can see, that is my answer. However, now what we can do is we can now divide in the usual format. So I've showed you 2 ways. One, to remove all of the decimals and do it just with basic integer format. Another, to try to figure out how to remove only the decimal point for the one that we're dividing with, as in the divisor. Just try to remove the decimal from the divisor that's already there. So if we do it kind of, a little bit faster now, because we are already done explaining how to divide. 67 times 8 is actually 536. If you subtract that from that, It's going to be 15. Now the 4 is going to come down. 67 times 2 is 134. If you divide that from that, subtract that from that, that gives me 20. The 1 comes down. And then 67 times 3 is 201. That gives me a remainder of 0. Now what? Now what happens to the answer? Is my answer 823? Nope. Because we do have what? We do have decimals over here. How many? We have 2 numbers that are right next to the decimals. We don't have any decimals over here. Just like we did for multiplication, once again, we are going to put the invisible decimal and move 2 units to the left. So my final answer is 8.23. Got it? So I hope you did understand both of my strategies. You can follow either one that suits you, okay? We have another example over here. Divide up to 1,000th. Okay, so if we want to divide these both, what we can do is we can follow the second strategy if you want to, because the first number, as you can see here, has a lot of numbers. If I want to remove the entire number, as in all of the decimals, it's going to be multiplied to 1 with 5 zeros. Okay? So instead of doing that, what we can do is we can remove the decimals in my divisor. To do that, we are not going to only multiply it with 10 because that just gets rid of one of the numbers. We're going to multiply it with 100. If we do 100 over here, we need to do 100 over here, remember? That gives me 49 here, but here that gives me what? 1 and 2. So it gives me here. So that gives me 34.617. Now what? Now we divide just like we have learned so far. So that gives me 34.617. So if it's 49 with that, let me just try to do 49 times 0 first. So that's just 0 because we know it's 49. So if we do that, that just gives me what? That just gives me, okay, we don't need to do that 0. Starting this again. Now let's look at divide up to 1,000, 0.34617 divided by 0.49. Okay. So the first thing that we do is, if we do want to remove all of these decimals from the numerator, it's going to take a long time. So instead of doing that, what you can do is you can actually get rid of the decimals in the divisor and try to do the same in the on the number up top. So if we do times 100 here, of course, the decimal is going to move 2 units to the right. That gives me 34.617. Down here is just 49. Now, if I divide it in usual format, 49 with 34.617. First of all, let me try to do 3, 4, and 6, okay? So 49 times 7 is actually 343. Subtracting these are going to give me 31. Now, because it's 49 and it's 31, we can, of course, put a 0 over here. That just gives me 31 over again. We're going to put a 7 here. Now, we can do what? 49 times 6. We can do the 49 times 6. That gives me 294. My remainder over here is 23. Now what? Is my answer done yet? Nope. Just like I said before, 3 digits next to the number. So we move 3 units to the left. That gives me what? That gives me 0.706. And as we can see here, the remainder here is 23. Okay? Let's now look at the next question. Okay, it's a practice material once again. I hope you do get this one correct. Now let's look at this example. So this example over here shows that a marathon race is 26.27 miles long. If a runner completes the race in 2.5 hours, what's their average speed in miles per hour? See, the average speed in miles per hour. So speed has a formula. The formula is distance over time, which is why the miles goes up, the hour goes down. So it's quite easy that they are basically asking us to do 26.27 over the time, which is 2.5. What do we do in this case? We already know that we can remove the decimal from the divisor, which means that we can do times 10 here, times 10 here, which gives me 262.7 because the decimal goes 1 unit to the right. And now here it's just going to be 25. If we do this basic division, that gives me 262.7, yeah? So 25 times 1 is 25, which ends up with a 1. Then we put the 2 down. Now we can do a 0. So that gives me 1 and 2. We can put the 7 down here. So in this particular case, we can try doing 25 times 5, which gives me a 125. Okay. Now that gives me a 2. Now, if we do really want to figure out the rest, instead of, properly removing the remainder, getting like a 0 in the remainder, we can actually continue. And to do that, what you do here is you need to put a decimal, okay? If we want to remove any sort of remainder, we put a decimal, which gives me a 0 over here. Now what? Now you do 25 times 0 as 0, which gives me a 20, okay? Now, because of this existing decimal, we need to put a 0 over here again. So that's how it works. Now we do what? 25 times 8, which is basically 200, and that it just ends up with no remainder as well. I hope you do understand, because the math went kind of big, but I hope you do understand what I've written here. So the final answer, if you think the final answer is 105.08, you're wrong. Why? Because the number here has had already a decimal right next to it, which means that it's going to go 1 unit to the left. So my final answer here is 10.508. And most definitely, we need to write the answer in miles per hour, right? If you think that my answer is ending here, we're wrong as well. But you know why? Because we need to round it to the nearest hundredth. So there's a lot of things that you do need to check whenever we look at a question, yeah? So the rounding off to a nearest hundredth really means what? It means that if we look at decimals, let's say if we look at 0.123, 1 here is basically 10th. 2 here represents hundredth. I hope you do now what it really means. It means we need to round it off to 2 decimal places. We cannot have 8 over here. Because 8, the number 8 here is bigger than 4, we need to add 1 to the number that goes right before it. And that gives me my final answer, 10.51 miles per hour. This was kind of big, but I hope you did understand this one. And let's move forward. Okay, we have a practice material. I hope you do get this one correct. We have another example here. Mrs. Thompson bought 6 bottles of water for 1.05 each and 14 pounds of meat. She paid a total of 45.5 for these items, including tax. What was the price per pound of meat? Okay, so let's see. First of all, he bought how many? She bought 6 bottles of water. Each was 105. So in total, for 6 bottles of water, how much did it cost? It cost 6 times 105. Do this on your own, and the answer is going to be $6.30, okay? Now what? Now, for 14 pounds of meat, she also bought 14 pounds of meat, and that she paid a total of 45.5, not including tax. So I need to know that just for 14 pounds of meat, how much did she really pay, okay? So for 14 pounds of meat, we don't know individually. We know that the total is 45.5. And we know that for the bottles, she paid 6.3. We've already figured that out. So if we do this minus this, most definitely, we are going to find out the cost for the 14 pounds of meat. Okay, that's what we do now. That gives me 39.20. Now what? Now what was the price per pound of meat? So for 14 pounds of meat, if it's this, so for 1 pound, it's what? 1 pound of meat, it's going to be what? It's going to be 39.20 divided by 40. It's just like if you paid $100 for 10 items, what's the cost per item? Is going to be 100 over 10, right? So same here. Do this division on your own. You are going to end up with $2.80, okay? All right. So that gives me another example. I hope you did understand. If you did, this is the last question for today, okay? I know we did a lot of questions today. This is the last question. John ran for 3 hours and covered a distance of this. Emily ran for 4 hours, covered another distance of this. Who was faster and how much faster? Okay. First of all, if we do want to know the speed, we have already discussed the formula for speed is distance over time. So let's try to figure out John's first, then we're going to do Emily's, all right? So the distance of John was 41.1. The time for John was 3. And if we want to go for Emily's, the distance was what? 57.2, and the time was 4. So if we want to, divide them, I'm not going to show you all of the workings because I do understand by now you are affiliated of how to divide them. So this is your answer. So these are both of the speeds, yeah? But now my question said who is faster. Of course, we do understand that Emily was faster, but how much faster? So by how much faster, what we need to do is we need to subtract this from this. And if you do that, let me just write the answer for you. That is 0.6. And you need to write the answer is kilometers per hour. So that's 0.6 kilometers per hour. Make sure that you don't forget to include the SI unit as the standard unit for this as well. And with that being said, that was the end of this particular lesson. Hope you did really enjoy it. Most definitely leave a comment below to know how we can improve ourselves. And at the same time, if you did enjoy all of the maths that we have already covered throughout this lesson. At the same time, if you cannot afford really expensive one-on-one tutoring and personalized tutoring, here's a solution for you. You can actually download our SHSAT Prep app from Apple App Store. It has a lot of practice materials for you, and at the same time there's also a predictive test which is actually going to give you that real feel of attending an exam. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a comment below and practice well for your exam.